everybody, welcome to No Plan, No Problem, a weekly D&D advice podcast where two dungeon masters take a deep dive into different topics to explore the possibilities and try and come up with 3 actionable tips for you to use in your next game. I'm your Dungeon Master Anto.
And I'm not invited to his games anymore, Matthew Perkins.
You can find my stuff across the internet at icarus-games.co.uk.
And you can find my stuff over at matthewperkins.net. Today we are going to be talking about problem dungeon masters. Now, my dude, you have probably heard about problem players, but did you know there can also be problem dungeon masters? Now, the problem player, of course, he's that creepy, awful dude that you don't want at your table, who says inappropriate things, who acts in inappropriate ways, and when they touch the dice come away slimy because of their filthy, filthy soul. The dungeon master can have the same kind of affliction, right? They can be the kind of person that you wouldn't want at your table, but here's the catch. This problem dungeon master is the person running the table. It's their table. They own it. They pay rent. They bought and built the table. But we're not just talking about creepy people, because a problem dungeon master can behave in a way that is problematic without being creepy. Ways that make the game not fun, not accessible. And maybe they think they're right. Maybe they think they're righteous. Maybe they think that they've got the correct juice to keep this game running. But actually, you could be a problem dungeon master and not even know it. So today we're going to find out exactly what those traits are and how to counteract them with the help of a few adventurous questionnaires.
The first adventurer trying to help us come up with some tips for you, dear listener, is Left-Handed Rogue from the D&D Beyond forums. And they say, I'm looking for advice on how to handle a DM that has taken over our games with his pet NPCs. He consistently creates or brings in these overly powerful NPCs and then contrives reasons why we need to deal with them, even when we have stated clearly and boldly that we want nothing to do with them. So, Matt, what do we think about this? About DMs that create NPCs and then shoehorn them into the game?
Yeah, and that's even got a name. Like, that's called the DMPC, which is a Dungeon Master player character. And the reason you wouldn't want a DMPC in your party, I think, for me as a player, I wouldn't want a DMPC in my party just because, as a player, I'm limited in my knowledge, right? I only know what, as a player, as a person, I can intuit. But the Dungeon Master knows everything that's coming up. They know all the stats. They know all the problems that are coming out. So I feel like the same way in a video game, if I was playing World of Warcraft, if I'm struggling every day to build my character and, advance the story and get higher levels, and then along comes a cheater who doesn't have to work for all that knowledge and all that expertise, that's how I would feel about a DMPC. How do you feel about them, Anto?
I agree that when they're used in that kind of way, when you've got a dungeon master that puts kind of a player character that they are controlling into the game and lives out their life kind of as a player but in the game, that is definitely a problem. I don't think that just having characters controlled by the dungeon master around the party or helping the party is inherently problematic, but I do think it is an area where you are prone to have kind of real problem moments when I think it comes from dungeon masters who really want to be players and kind of resent the fact that they're not players, so they're going to be dungeon masters and players at the same time.
Can I like hit you? Let's try and be charitable here. So what do you think that the benefits, from the DM's perspective, if I'm putting a DMPC in my party, what reason, what utility am I kind of unlocking here, do you think? What are the benefits?
I think you could go a couple different ways with it. You can fill gaps in the party, so to speak. So if the party doesn't have a healer, you can give them a cleric and kind of keep them alive a little bit longer doing that. Yeah. Or you could take the point of view of, I'm doing this for balance. The game assumes that there's going to be 4 to 6 players. I've only got 3, so I'm going to throw a DMPC in there just to make up the numbers so that I don't have to recalculate every single encounter that they go into. Like, I understand looking at it from that point of view, but I do think there are other ways around that. Like, if you have fewer players, adjust your encounters, or just throw balance out the window entirely. Just throw caution to the wind.
I can think of another reason the DM might want to put in a DMPC, and that would be because, I want to have a character along to be able to guide them. Like, maybe my story is a little bit unclear for this, little section, and it's a bit open world, and I just want to have the opportunity to give the players guidance if they ever need it. And that's, noble, right? You're saying, I am preempting the needs of my players. I'm preempting the needs that they might need healing. I'm preempting the needs that maybe they need an extra player to balance out this encounter. I'm preempting their needs that they might get confused in this little bit of the story, and I want to help them out. But all of that is outweighed. All of that is outweighed by the problems. And this is going to be a trend, by the way. A lot of the things that problem dungeon masters are going to be doing, they're probably doing with good intentions. You know, they're probably saying, I'm doing this for a reason. It's going to make the game better. But it doesn't. It makes your friends' experience around the table a little bit worse.
Yeah, I think like you were saying in the intro, there's a difference between a problem dungeon master and a problem person. And a problem dungeon master will probably be coming at it from a place of good intentions, trying to help or aid their players in whatever way they can, and then just kind of get lost along the way. And they don't realize quite the impact that they're having on the players at the table.
But this person that's stuck in a party with a DM PC, that they've clearly, from the question, the way it's phrased, they've tried to rebuke this dungeon master and say, hey, we don't want it, but you're continually trying to shoehorn this particular character in. This, you know, this half-elf, you know, drow rogue that's super edgy. You're going, we don't want him in the party. And then he shows up in the next town. No, we don't want him in the party. And then he shows up and he's got the magic item that you need to progress the story. Look, we just don't want him in the party. Keeps on bringing him back.
I think that in a situation like that, it may be that if it's a recurring NPC, it might be that this particular dungeon master is trying to elicit a specific kind of feeling and emotion from the party. Maybe there is an NPC that they want the party to be frustrated with. They want the characters to be frustrated with. And they think, if I keep introducing them in these key moments and have them thwart the party's plans or get in their way in some way, it will over time develop this kind of negative relationship, and they can be like rivals.
Oh, okay.
But instead of doing that in a way that drip feeds it, they might just be going a little too heavy-handed with it and showing this NPC a little bit too frequently.
Yeah. Well, that's a pretty interesting point, because there is a separation between players and characters, right? And you're suggesting that maybe the dungeon master is actually trying to piss off these characters, but they're also pissing off these players. And here's something like a distinction that I make when I'm a player, because sometimes there is inter-party conflict, or there's a conflict between my character and an NPC, and my character's being really rude or something like that. Whenever that happens and my character's being rude to another character, I make sure out of character to say, hey, I just want to let you know I'm having a lot of fun. This is really great. I love this character, but I also love role-playing hating them.
Yeah. I think that the separation between player and character is something, it's a fine line that is really easy to kind of blur. And as dungeon masters, it's easy to do that as well. You might put something in your game that you intend to elicit a specific feeling from the characters, but not the players. But if a player can't separate themselves from their character in that clean break kind of way, then chances are you're going to also elicit the same kind of feeling and emotion from the player as well as the character. So if you're introducing something that you want to produce a negative emotion in a character, there's a good chance you'll produce a negative emotion in the player as well.
And you know, what's really funny about this is the tip that we're probably circling towards isn't anything like don't use dungeon master player characters, because there is definitely a way to do it in a good way, and if you have the best intentions and you do it in the best way, of course it can work out, right? But it sounds like this dungeon master is not listening to the players, his friends around the table, when they're telling him, hey, we don't like this character. We don't enjoy playing this story with this character. And we're repeatedly telling this character to go away. Please stop bringing them in. And the dungeon master's still bringing them up, bring them up, and bring them up. They're annoying the players, not necessarily annoying the characters.
Yeah, exactly. I think that in terms of this specific question and DM PCs specifically, my tip here would be to tread very carefully with your DM PCs and really hone in to how the players are reacting to them, not just the characters. And if your DM PC doesn't work, then just get rid of it. Right then, Matt, are you ready to roll for sponsors?
Yes. You know the drill, my dudes. We're a tiny, teeny, weeny little podcast. We don't have those big dollary dues sponsorship bucks, but we do have a lot of friends. So one of our friends is a fella named ThinkDM. That's his legal name. And he runs a website called thinkdm.org. He is writing the best Dungeons & Dragons articles going out there. I think he rivals the Alexandrian in the quality of these articles. He takes a real methodical, mathematical approach to solving all these kinds of things. So do you want to know exactly when, as a barbarian, you should use your reckless attack? Check out thinkdm.org. If you want to know exactly when you should use your sharpshooter feat ability, then check out thinkdm.org. He's got a great variety of articles and generally quality human. Big fan, big fan.
You'll be able to find links to ThinkDM in the show notes. And if you're enjoying the podcast, why not give us a like and a follow? Really helps out small podcasts like ours. And you can drop us a 5-star review. That helps in spades. And if you want to get more stuff from No Plan, No Problem, you can find us over on Patreon too. Okay, so to search for our second tip of the show, we're going to take a little break out and go over to StatsTown. And what I want to do today, Matt, is I want us to try and come up with some kind of stats for the Problem Dungeon Master. I want to try and make the Problem Dungeon Master as a monster that we could throw against the player characters.
Right, so it's going to be really cathartic for this party. All these people that have asked questions about Problem Dungeon Masters. Hey, now you can kill him. You can kill him.
Exactly. You know, this is the kind of monster that you as a DM could throw at your party in way of an apology to say sorry for all the times that I threw that NPC at you that you really didn't like. Now you can, go to town.
Okay, you can go to StatsTown.
You can go to StatsTown.
Okay, so I think that let's not focus on the challenge rating at all, and let's not focus on any of the actual numbers, but let's think about the abilities that he has. Yeah. He probably has legendary actions, and he probably has lair actions as well, do you think?
Yeah, I think legendary actions and lair actions, those kind of abilities are where we want to focus this stats down. Those are where the real juice is going to come. And then you as listeners can go ahead and plug in all the rest of the stats depending on the level of your party.
Okay, well, this is going to be fun. Let's say that he has an ability called I'm not listening to you, and it's when the Problem Dungeon Master doesn't listen to the players. Any spell within 30 feet of the Problem Dungeon Master that has a verbal component fizzles because he's not listening.
Yeah, no, I like that. I like that a lot. I like a reaction, a legendary reaction that's something like I've got to look something up, and you can interrupt a player's action to consult the rulebook for up to 1 minute, and then they lose the rest of their action.
I love that one. That's so good. Okay, so this one is called I'm the Main Character. And this is to replicate the fact that when the Dungeon Master's player character takes over the main story or completes another player's goal, what happens is they use their action to cast this spell, and somewhere out there in the world it changes reality so that one of the players' backstories is now resolved. It just resolves it. It avenges your dead father. It finds your lost child, and it also buys back the family farm. Hey, I'm the main character.
Amazing. Oh yes, I love that. Going back to our kind of search for tip number 1 as well, we could have a lair action that's kind of a summoning of the DM PCs. Ooh. And they can summon 1d4 or 1d6 DM NPCs as lesser monsters at the start of the round to come in and fight for them.
Okay, yeah, that's good. That's very good. And it's they're kind of shadowy clones of the party. Or actually, how about this? They're better versions of all the party characters.
Oh, yes. Yeah, just a couple levels up from the party. All their same abilities, all their same prepared spells, all their same tragic backstories that they will exposit as they're trying to kill the players.
Okay, here's a really short one. This one is just called, it's a reaction, and it's just called no. The players start doing something, you go, no.
Yes, I love that one. Just nope, shut it down. Shut it down. Oh, I've got one last one. Give it plot armor. So as a reaction, anytime it takes an attack, it can use the plot armor reaction and just be no, I don't die from that, because reasons, and I'm still alive.
That's beautiful. Oh, okay. You know how Dungeon Masters fudge dice? How problem Dungeon Masters sometimes fudge a lot of dice?
Mm-hmm.
This attack is just called fudge. And what happens is like all the terrain just becomes like very sweet and gelatinous, and the players start sinking into all of this fudge. And the Dungeon Master, while any character that's in fudge, the Dungeon Master gets to decide what they roll.
Oh, yes. I love that. Just fudge in the dice rolls of the enemy, fudge in the terrain. Perfect. So you might be thinking, now, come on, guys, that's all well and good, and those are all really fun and exciting rules, but how are we going to find a tip out of this? Well, the tip for this, my friends, is as a Dungeon Master, you will, over your career as a Dungeon Master, your lifetime as a Dungeon Master, you will probably employ rules that are as ridiculous as those ones we just made to the players. So you need to be aware of the kind of rules that you're adding to the game. Because one of the ways that you can be a problem Dungeon Master is adding homebrew rules that really break things for the party and really punish your players. So you need to be really mindful of any rules that you create.
That's a really good tip. I love that the tip is pretty much don't do what
Don't
these
do
people
what we just did.
Don't do what we did. Yeah, that's a totally fair point, because some of those abilities, except the fudge one is good, you can use that. Those abilities weren't necessarily fun. They weren't enabling player ideas.
No.
And they wouldn't be fun to play against. Remember, if you want to actually get the stats for this problem Dungeon Master that we just made, you can get it off our Patreon.
So Matt, who's going to help us find our final tip of the episode?
The adventurer helping us with our third tip is the L Spike from over D&D Beyond on the forums. And the L Spike says, "Dear Dungeon Masters, in one of my latest games, I've put the players up against a spellcaster that has the spell Counterspell prepared. This was done to oppose the party's spellcaster to make sure that person no longer has Fireball. In the first few rounds, this spellcaster managed to counterspell this player only once before being targeted by the party and taken down. Am I a bad Dungeon Master for doing that? Is it a bad choice to put the enemies against the party that specifically nullify a strategy which the party relies on? Does that sound like a problem Dungeon Master? Does that sound like a bad Dungeon Master to you, Anto?"
Not even a little bit. Like that. No. If anything, that sounds like bad players.
I don't. It sounds like a good Dungeon Master.
If there is a problem here, I imagine that it is a miscommunication between the Dungeon Master and the players. I imagine up until this point, the Dungeon Master has probably not challenged the players in combat in that way before, not given them a challenge that directly counters their abilities. And if they've been playing for quite a while, I can see how as a player the first time that comes up, that would come across as being almost mean-spirited because it's not come up before. But I don't think that makes them a bad Dungeon Master, a problem Dungeon Master. They are using the tools that are available to them as a Dungeon Master to challenge the player characters.
Yeah, maybe we can use this as an opportunity to try and really define that line between what being a problem Dungeon Master means and what just being a Dungeon Master means. Because the only way that this person, in this instance, is a bad or a problematic Dungeon Master from this is if when they counterspell, they went, "Oh, I can't believe you even tried to Fireball. Don't you even know? Don't you know that I have Counterspell?
Yeah.
Oh, you are such a bad player. I hate you. I hate you, wizard."
That would definitely be a problem Dungeon Master. That would 100% be a problem Dungeon Master, but I don't think that that's what this Dungeon Master is. I think that if anything, this comes down to player expectation, which is what a lot of being a Dungeon Master is managing your players' expectation.
Oh, can I ask, expectation as to what? What was miscommunicated, do you think?
I think the players had gotten to the point where their expectation was that they fight things in the world and the world never directly challenges them as the specific characters they are. The world will just exist and have challenges and nothing will ever adapt to them specifically. Whereas the Dungeon Master will have gone, right, okay, maybe these characters know that the players are coming, or there just happens to be a wizard there. And as soon as they come in and notice the wizard, because wizards tend to be pretty noticeable because they're the ones that aren't clad head to toe in armor, they'll notice the wizard and go, right, okay, I need to counterspell that wizard, otherwise they're going to fireball my eyebrows off. And I don't think that it's a problem Dungeon Master to have the characters in the world look at a group of adventurers and be able to go, right, okay, that one's got a really big sword and is wearing really heavy armor. So the things that I know don't work against that character, I'm not even going to bother to try. It's a playing the monsters more intelligently kind of thing. And the expectation on the player's part is they're probably used to fighting pretty stupid monsters, and they feel entitled to fight stupid monsters.
It is definitely within the Dungeon Master's purview to challenge the characters and challenge the player's perception of those characters. So not only just in instances where I'm saying, look, your character has been relying on Fireball a lot, I'm going to take that away briefly and let's see how your character reacts, right? That's a classic storytelling tool. They do it in every kind of video game. Like I was playing God of War recently, and they give you all these skills and abilities, and you have like you're a big beard dad, and you have your nice boy son with you, and he comes along with you, and he shoots his arrows, and you go, yeah man, Atreus is really shooting these arrows for me. It's great. But then they go, how about a level where you don't have Atreus? How does that affect your playstyle? Or then later they go, you've been really using this axe for a long time. What if you didn't have the axe for a level? How does that affect your playstyle? And Dungeons and Dragons, we can do the same kind of thing. Just tinker with your character, tinker with the abilities you have, and tinker with the expectations you have of your characters and players, and just kind of see what happens.
If anything, I think I would actually advocate that this Dungeon Master and Dungeon Masters in general specifically challenge the player characters more, because I think that this is quite a common thing, that Dungeon Masters are hesitant to challenge the characters directly based on who the characters are as people and their specific abilities, because they're worried it will come across as kind of metagaming, and they don't want to be a bad Dungeon Master. But in most games, the player characters will start to gain a level of notoriety. If they leave people alive, they'll be able to tell people, they'll be able to spread stories of the kind of abilities these characters have. Word of them will spread, and their enemies will use that against them. So if they're fighting against any kind of intelligent creature that has any kind of foreknowledge about them, why wouldn't those creatures plan specifically against those characters?
I think Critical Role does this well really sometimes, because they have a number of villains that get to resurface for various reasons. And when those villains resurface, they specifically remember what happened to them in the previous combat that was there. And they go like, okay, you cast Hold Person on half my party, so this time we're going to cast Freedom of Movement beforehand. And when you try and cast Hold Person on us again, we're going to vocally call that out and be like, haha, not this time, you wizard.
That's something in my last campaign. I built basically the entire campaign off the back of that. Every time the players had an encounter, if there was a reasonable explanation to do so, their enemy would learn about them. And the next encounter, the enemy would deploy specific things against them. And it was this game of like 4D chess over the course of 2 years, as the players had to conceal certain abilities. Like there was sessions where they'd get a new ability and they wouldn't use it because they didn't want the other side knowing about it. And it added this great extra dimension to the game. But at no point did the players feel like I was being a problem, because that was something that I did throughout the campaign. It's not something that I just suddenly started doing. And I think that in this case, it's probably that the Dungeon Master suddenly started doing that, and then the players felt off balance. They weren't expecting it.
In your instance, it sounds like that's a great example of the trust that your players have for you, because a lot of the things that problem Dungeon Masters do, if there's trust between the DM and the players, then it doesn't appear as a problem, because they go, I know he's doing something that I don't like right now, but I trust that there's a payoff, or I trust that he's going to be fair about it. So it sounds like your players trusted that, look, we know the rules, and the rules are, if we use an ability, then it will be, that will be forewarned the enemies against us later. Anto, the Dungeon Master, he knows that we have the ability, but since we haven't used it, we trust that he won't metagame and stamp us down anyway.
I think that if I was going to sum that up as a tip...
Oh, yeah, we should do that.
The whole point of the podcast. I would sum it up as challenge your players fairly. Don't metagame against the players.
That's true, because let's take it to the extreme. Because if you imagine this, every combat as a player, the Dungeon Master is shutting down the thing that I designed my character for. Like, imagine I play a barbarian. A barbarian is extremely limited in their mobility. They don't have a lot of escape techniques. And imagine every single combat, there was something that tried to restrain my barbarian. And I never actually got that yee-haw moment of seeing my character excel at the thing that I designed them for, which is crash tackling harpies off very high cliffs.
That is a beautifully specific example that I'm here for. But I think as Dungeon Masters, it is possible to metagame in a way to benefit the players.
In their favor is they will get fun out of this. Like you can have metagame in their favor and they still lose.
There are plenty of players for whom the pain and suffering is the fun.
Yeah, we like to call ourselves professional losers. So the L Spike, you are not a bad Dungeon Master. We love and appreciate you. Did we do the podcast? Is it done?
I think we did the podcast.
Hey, what were the tips?
Tip number 1 is if a DM PC doesn't work, just get rid of it. Just get it out of there. Tip number 2 was be mindful of the rules that you create and how they're going to impact the players. And tip 3 was never metagame against the players' fun.
Man, those are some really concise tips. Like, sometimes we have tips that run for paragraphs.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes.
Well, hunky-dory, job well done. My name has been Matthew Perkins. You can find my stuff over at matthewperkins.net.
And I'm Anto, and you can find my stuff at icarus-games.co.uk. If you enjoy No Plan, No Problem, don't forget to leave a like, leave a review, do all the interaction things with the analytics, because it really helps us out.
It certainly does. The song playing us out at the moment is called All Together by a band called House House. Thanks for listening. This has been No Plan, No Problem.
We're right. All together, all right.